Good day, everyone. It's my pleasure to share and discuss with you about elements and principles of design. I'm Ms. Rinzel Mahasay from Northern Negros State College of Science and Technology, BDLED-HE. We are living in a world full of colors, patterns, and creativity. Then let's create art from the heart. Now, before we begin our lesson, try to analyze the artwork created by the famous artist Edvard Munch. I'm sure you already heard this name before. His paintings has become one of the most iconic images of art, seen as symbolizing the anxiety of the human condition. His paintings serve as a reminder that everyone feels sad or panic or depressed sometimes. The frame of the artwork is testament to that. Take a look at this painting over here. This is the artwork that we will analyze. I'm sure you've seen this artwork before. On a wall maybe? On a t-shirt? On a mural? Basically, we see this everywhere. But do you know its title? Yes, The Scream by the none other Edvard Munch. Let's analyzing this artwork. You can list down your observation, answer with your papers or notebooks. Let's begin with by the description of the artwork. What are the things have you seen about the artwork? List down all of those things and describe each. Now, on to interpretation. What did Edvard Munch wanted to imply in his art? Is it the title The Scream appropriate the image? Why do you think so? For analysis, based on your prior knowledge from the past grade levels, what do you think are the elements of arts and used by the artist? They were designed indicating the process of envisioning and planning the creation of objects or interactive systems. User art at the heart of designing thinking approach. It is about creating solutions for people. Items are more abstract system to address a need or problem. Design is not just about what it looks like and feels like. Design is show its risks. The goal of this process is to guide you and organize your work to turn into ideas into concrete solutions. Some designs are so well integrated that they hide qualities beyond some museum of their parts, such as said to be beautiful, interesting, absorbing, or surprising. Art and beauty can express in many ways. In natural beauty of all huge trees or creative beauty of painting of those trees, like in the case of Van Gogh's large pine trees. Depicted in this painting are those principles of design that made his work beautiful or expressive. So what are the principles of design? The principles of design are balance, proportion, rhythm, emphasis, and unity. Let's discuss first the principles of design. Balance. Balance is the concept of visual equilibrium and relate to our physical sense of balance. It is a reconciliation of opposing process in a composition that result visual stability. Most successful composition achieve balance in two ways. Having equal weight on equal sides of a century place is called symmetrical balance, referred as formal balance. The more complex and difficult to envisage is called asymmetrical balance, also called informal balance. This can be imagined by envisioning a literal balance scale that can represent the visual weights that can imagine in two-dimensional composition. Next is proportion. Proportion refers to the relative size and scale of the various elements in a design. The issue is the relationship between objects or parts of a whole. Our most universal standard of measurement is the human body. That is our experience of living in our own bodies. We judge the appropriateness of size of objects by that measure. A surprising aspect of proportion is that the way ideal properties can vary for the human body itself. Style change in the bodies as they do in clothing. Prior to the 16th century, take a look at this example. The female body ideally had large hips and belly. On latter was a small waistline stress. Third is rhythm. Rhythm is not only found in music. Rhythm in visual art described as time movement through space. An easy connected visual rhythm can be created in a number of ways. First, linear rhythm. It refers to the characteristic flow of the individual line. Second, repetition. It involves the use of patterning to achieve time movement and visual beat. Third, alternation. Specific instance of patterning in which sequence of repeating motifs are presented in turn, either short or long, fat or thin, round or square, and dark or light. And the last, gradation. It employs a series of motion patterns to relate one another through a regular progressions of steps. This means gradation of shape or color. Next is emphasis. When we are telling a story to other people, we tend to give emphasis on the key parts of our story. That way, the listener will focus on the important information when it comes to art. Artist or designer uses emphasis to call attention to something in order to hold the viewer's interest by providing visual surprises. Emphasis can be achieved in a number of ways. First, repetition. Create emphasis by calling attention to repeated element through force of number. Second, contrast. Achieve emphasis by stating point of emphasis apart from the rest of its background. Contrast of color, texture, or shape will call attention or specific of point. Contrast of size or a scale will as well. Placement in a strategic position will call attention its particular elements of a design. Prolonged visual element through intricacy, contrast of detail, is a more visual form of emphasis. And the last of principles of design is unity. Its underlying principle summarizes all the principles and elements of design. It refers to the coherence of the whole, the sense of all parts are working together to achieve a common result. Pattern, underlying structure, most fundamental element for a strong sense of unity. Consistency of form and color, also powerful tools that can pull a composition together. However, unity also exists in variety. Unity can also be a matter of concept. The element and principles can be selected to support the intended functions of the design object. The purpose of the object unifies the design. Speaking of elements, that is the next topic that we are going to talk about. Take a look at this figure. Listed in the first column are the elements of art, and on the first row are the principles of designs. Observe the relationships of elements of arts and principles of design. The elements are components or parts which can be isolated in any visual design or work of art. They are the structure of the work and can carry a wide variety of messages. The elements are point, lines, form, shape and space, movement, color, pattern, texture, and volume. Let's discuss each one, starting with point and lines. Even if there's only one point, one mark, or a blank page, there is something built into the brain that wields meaning for it and seeks some kind of relations or order, if only to those use is at point of orientation and see a line. It is the fundamental tool that designer or artist use to build a coherent composition. Jessup theory developed in the 1920s in Germany. They include observe in which mind applies missing pieces to complete the image. This occurs in Mona Lisa image to the right. Second concept is continuity. To connect the dots and to accept separate parts or points as part of a contour form. On the other hand, similarity describes the tendency to see and group objects of similar shape or color, and proximity result in a tendency to group points of objects that are close to one another relative to less proximate in the visual field. Lines have different expressive qualities. For example, in calligraphy, it's recognizable as representation of words, even without know the language. Another, line in the form of maps is readily recognized as a symbolic representation of a place. The place may be a local neighborhood or the entire world. We understand it to be people which can understand the relationship within a place, how to get from here to there, and graphs. Graphs are another readily recognizable linear device. They are widely used to communicate quantitative information and relationship in a visual way. Line also communications emotion and states of mind through its character and direction. It's either horizontal line that suggests a feeling of rest or repose. One of the hallmarks of Frank Lloyd Wright's architectural style is the use of strong horizontal elements which stress the relationship of the structure to the land. Another, vertical lines. It also communicate a feeling of loftiness and spirituality. Another, diagonal lines, which suggest a feeling of movement or direction. Diagonal positions are usable in relation to gravity. Being neither vertical nor horizontal, they are either about to fall or already in motion, as certainly the case for this group of dancers. An illusion of properties that pulls the viewer into picture, creating an illusion of space that one could move about within. As an additional knowledge shown here are the alphabet of lines which are used in any representation and structural designs. These are object or visible line, constructed line, dimension line, hidden line, and center line. Next, form, shape, volume, and space. Form and shapes are areas or masses which define objects in space. It can be thought either 2 or 3-dimensional, which has a width and height, or 2-dimensional form, has depth as well as width, height, and volume, which is a 3-dimensional shape. Form and shape can be also described as either organic or geometric. Take a look at this picture. This is an example of organic forms. Snow-covered boulders typically are irregular in outline and often asymmetrical. Geometric forms are those which correspond to name regular shapes, such as squares, rectangles, circles, cubes, shapes, sphere, cones, and other regular forms. This architecture, exampled by Frank Lloyd Wright, It usually composed of geometric forms. These forms are most often thought of as a constructed or made. There are some other terms commonly used to describe form and shape in composition. We refer to the images as being realistic or naturalistic. However, if the images are difficult or impossible to identify in terms of our normal daily visual experience, we may refer to the images as abstract. An example of this would be one of Jordan Cooke's paintings of a detail from a flower. This kind of abstraction refers to as an objective image that is derived from actual object. Two-dimensional form. Two-dimensional form is the foundation of pictorial organization or composition in painting, photography, and many other media. It is created in a number of ways. Value can also define form, the relative lightness or darkness of color. In the same way, hue, contrast, and gradation can also define forms. Most typically, forms is defined by a combination of these factors, as is the case of Friend by Max Ernst. Form and shapes can be through also of a positive or negative. Some artists play with the reversal of positive and negative space to create complex illusions. See the print of M.C.H. here. Often features interlocking images that play with our perceptions of what is foreground and what is background. In two-dimensional illusion of three-dimensional form, two-dimensional form can create the illusion of three-dimensional shape and spaces. We never look at a flat surface, a television screen, and assume we are looking at spaces and objects that have depth. We are accepting a set of visual signals that create illusions of three-dimensional space. Realistic copies of the material would be not valued instead. Stylized symbols of historical and religious subjects were desired. As a result, medieval images like this one were generally flat appearance or gave mixed signals about the three-dimensional space depicted. The tools for creating illusions of three-dimensional space are overlapping, changing side and placement, linear perspective, relative hue and value, and atmospheric perspective. Next on three-dimensional form. Three-dimensional form is the basis of architecture and most designed objects. Fashion designers paid official province of engineering and spatial thinking. In that, the problem is to translate two-dimensional material, which is cloth, into a three-dimensional form, which is the body shapes. Three-dimensional shape has an expressive vocabulary similar to that of line. For example, rectilinear shapes suggest stability. Angular shapes placed diagonally in relation to gravity suggest instability. Shapes that can exhibit softly curving surfaces suggest quiet, comfort, and sensuality. Next, movement. Movement is the element that operates in the fourth dimensions, the time. This is the process of relation of object in space over time. We can speak movement as literal of compositional. For the first time, we had an art form that literally move. Humor could not though develop into new physical dimensions as could dramatic and fantastic storytelling and dramatization. Example of that, Buster Keaton clips. However, New approaches were suggested by multiple frame images of motions, picture film, and stop-action photography. Futurist painters such as Bala used these ideas to celebrate speed and movement. Movement may also be classified as dynamic. It characterized by movement of the eye that flows smoothly from one area of the composition to another, guided by continuations of line or forms, and by gradations of color or form. Next, color, value, and hue. One of the most powerful elements is color. It has tremendous expensive qualities. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, black and white, and all positive combinations thereof. Hue is the correct word to use to refer to just the pure spectrum of colors. Any given color can be described in terms of its value and hue. Value defined as the relative lightness or darkness of a color. Value separates objects in space and contrast, while the value suggests mass and contour of a contiguous surface is gradation. Take a look in the drawing on the right. Value contrast separates the article from the background, and separates leaves from one another, while gradation suggests the curves of leaves' surfaces and of the whole. Hue has also value. Take a look at this color image of the fashion model. The code draws our attention through contrast of hue, although the skin tones blend with the background. However, it also seems to be softly blending with the background that seems quite close, and is very similar to the cut in value. The face tends to blend with the background, which is similar in both hue and value. If value are close, shapes will seem to flatten out and seem closely connected in space. None will stand out from the others. If value contrast, shapes will appear to separate in space, and some will appear to separate in space, and some will stand out from others. The term for the spectrum colors is hue, referred by the color names red, orange, yellow, blue, green, violet, which appear in the hue circle of rainbow. Red, blue, yellow are the painter's primaries based on 19th century theories. The traditional definition of primaries does not in fact mix to clear greens or purples. Red, blue, green are light primaries. It referred sometimes to as additive mixture. The colors that are opposite one another on the hue circle is called complements. Next, color illusions. Some of the effect of color occurs only in the eye and brain of the viewer, and are not physical properties of light, wave, or pigment. The illusions, however, are very powerful and have enormous impact on our responses to color, which are the color proportions, simultaneous contrast of optical mixture. The psychological implications of colors. Red associated with blood. Orange is the color of flesh. Yellow is the color of sunshine. Green suggests nature. Blue suggests coolness, distances, spirituality, or elegance. And violet is the color of fantasy, playfulness, impulsive, and dream state. Next, pattern. It is an underlying structure that organizes surfaces or structures in a consistent, regular manner. Pattern exists in nature as well, as is designed object. It is useful to look at the parallels. Peter Steven, a Harvard biologist, has published a book entitled Patterns in Nature, in which he claims that there are only an infinite number of ways that patterns can be structured. He starts with the idea of grid as the foundation for any structure or image. Each of these modes are also can be seen in examples of designed objects and works of art. Flow, branching, packing, and cracking. And last elements of arts is texture. In visual arts, texture is the quality of an object which presents through touch. It exists as a literal surface we can feel, but also as a surface we can see. And imagine the sensations might have and felt in. It can also be portrayed in an image, so a texture can be imaginary. There are many kinds of textures. Is it bristly, rough, and hard? It can be also be smooth, cold, and hard too. Smooth, soft, or worn, and wet or dry are also textures. In fact, any tactile sensation you can imagine is a texture. The creation of the illusions of texture is also an important element in many painting, drawings, textile designs, and other surface designs. They can be observed and discussed separately from the tactile qualities of the actual materials and the surface of the work. I hope you have fun learning today. And now I'm going to present DIY vase. Its process or steps on how to create crafts by the use of its elements and principles of design. So first, prepare its material and doing DIY vase. And these are rope, wire, empty container, scissor, of course, the glue gun and stick glue. First, we are going to put rattan string as the base of our DIY vase. Second, put 7.5-inch wire around the container. Third, wrap the first pink rope around the container. Fourth, alternately wrap the pink rope and white rope with 1.5-inch allowance around the container. Fifth, bend the wire for easy cover of the rope. Then continue wrap white rope until to achieve its desired design. Sixth, wrap a pink rope to the edge of DIY vase. The extreme wire and put some DIY flower around the face as its design. DIY vase. That's it for today. Don't forget to explore your creativity. And remember to create art from the heart.